The thing that I'm most scared to hit publish on is probably the best thing I've ever written. The more afraid you are, likely the better it is. You're building this muscle. You're doing it. And so you do it once, okay, you get a little better at it. You do it 10 times, you're starting to build that muscle a little bit. You do it 150 times, well, you've built up that muscle pretty good. It's not so hard anymore. You're still going to get a little nervous. You're still going to get a little, there's going to be trepidation or fear, but you've built that muscle up enough now that, okay, there's this crazy thing, but I'm just going to do it. I'm going to hit launch. It works in your brain that way. It's the plasticity of your brain. It's how your brain works.
Welcome to The Creator's Journey. I'm your host, Charles Gupton. Each week, I'll talk with creative leaders who face the same fears and obstacles we all face. What makes these folks effective are the processes they've developed that allow them to push through the darkness to consistently ship their work and make a difference. If you've ever felt that your fears and insecurities are getting the best of you, know that you're not alone. Every creator who works from the heart faces the same challenges. Come join our community at thecreatorsjourney.com for ideas and inspiration that will bring light and direction to your journey.
Here's the key to my front door. Got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a home. Here's somebody who believes you. Let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
My guest today is Berg. Greg is a man of many, and I mean many, creative talents. He's a photographer, videographer, web designer, print designer, musician, and radio podcast host. What has impressed me most about Greg is the intentionality with which he directs his life. After surviving an horrific car accident in his teens, where paramedics at first thought he was dead, he's focused on using his bonus time here on Earth to the best of his ability to bring out the best in other people. In the wake of being downsized from a couple of back-to-back jobs in a stumbling economy, Greg and his wife sold their St. Louis home, where he grew up and had deep roots, and moved to sunny San Diego in search of a fresh start. After establishing himself in a new region in 2008, in the midst of another economic slump, he gave up his job as marketing director as one of the largest YMCA branches in the U.S. to pursue his passion for creating things of significance. Inspired by the inaugural 2011 World Domination Summit in Portland, Greg started his first podcast, Radio Enso, Tools and Inspiration for Conscious Living. He produced nearly 150 episodes interviewing well-known guests including Brene Brown, Chris Brogan, Nancy Duarte, Danielle Laporte, Jonathan Fields, Chris Guillebeau, and Pamela Slim. His aim was to discover what makes creatives, seekers, and nonconformists tick. This past fall, Greg had the courage to make a change in his approach and direction and embarked on yet another fresh start with a new podcast called Life on Purpose. With this new endeavor, he intends to drill deeper into helping people become more intentional with their daily habits and mindsets. As a musician, Greg's performed in front of thousands and opened for many artists, including Sean Colvin, Ben Folds, and Dada. And with that, I welcome a brother from another shore, Berg.
Thank you, Charles. I'm happy to be your brother from another shore, left coast to east coast.
Yes, sir. I have really been enjoying your new endeavor.
Thank you, Charles.
So yeah, hat tip to you.
Thank you. Yeah, starting over is something we're all scared of. It's when you've got something that's working, you think, well, don't, there was there's sort of the cliche of, not wanting to mess with what's working. Don't mess with what's working. And so you've got something that's working at a reasonably successful level. You're happy with aspects of it. You think, well, okay, I'm just going to leave that on. Then why mess with that? Because it's a known quantity. And that's really what it gets down to. And all those, it was kind of funny hearing you read my biography there. I was like, wow, I did that. Oh yeah, I did that. Oh yeah, I did that. And the various aspects of my life, there were times when there were things that were sort of working, or maybe they weren't. But, in general, we all have periods in our lives where things are working fairly well, but we want more. And I aspired to more from my show. And so I thought, well, at some point, I got to the point where I knew I couldn't continue as it was with the old show. There were just too many things I wanted to do that I couldn't on that platform the way that I was hosting and delivering my podcast. And so I just made the decision to pull the plug and said, okay, we're going to do 2 more episodes. We're going to finish this up. I'm going to take some time off to both build the new show and just give myself a little bit of a break because it had been 3.5 years, and I'd gone nonstop, as you said, nearly 150 episodes. And so it was originally going to be just a few weeks off, and it turned into about 3 months, I think. But it was a very needed 3 months, and it allowed me to really do things and put things in a way that I wanted to put them. As I was sort of molding the clay, I needed a little more time because I didn't have everything figured out, but I knew I wanted to make that change. And so, yeah, it was scary at the time. It was, or am I going to be able to get people to come over to this new platform, this new show? Is it going to resonate with my old audience? Is it going to be everything that I thought it was going to be? But thankfully, it's been yes, 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 and even beyond what I had expected. So I was incredibly fortunate that for the first 2 months of the show, and I launched in the beginning of January 2015, I made it into iTunes' new and noteworthy listing, which as a podcaster is something of the holy grail because you're right there on the front page of iTunes when people pull up podcasts. They check out either the overall sort of ratings, what's hot, what in order the popular podcast, or they want to see what's new and noteworthy. What are the new shows that are catching people's attention? And if you get into the new and noteworthy listing, it attracts, in my case, thousands of new people to come in and check out the show, which was just such a tremendous boon for people that hadn't known about your past work, that hadn't known about the past show, and suddenly they're coming in and they're checking out, what you're doing. And then some of them are going to stick around. It's going to resonate with them, and some of them move on. But at least you have the opportunity for people to see what you're all about. And I was very fortunate that at one point I was number 2 in one of the categories that I'm listed in on iTunes in new and noteworthy. And so that was a lot of fun. That was all through January and February.
Yeah, and that's no small feat. I was proud of you to see your endeavor hit that and get the kind of success and the response that it has. So, yeah. Pleased for you and proud of you.
Well, thank you, Charles. But a really key point is that, you have this little spike, this nice little spike, and it happens for 2 months. But I also was very keenly aware of the fact that after 2 months, you're out of the listings. They only go for 8 weeks if you make it into those listings. And so what's going to happen then? You're not on the front page of iTunes. Did people actually subscribe? Are they going to stick around long term? And so, that's when the old voices of fear and doubt come back into your head. They creep into your head that, all creatives face this in every creative project that we do. And so I knew that was coming. And so I went through about a week where I didn't look at my numbers on my host, Libsyn, which I use. I didn't look at my numbers. I didn't look at iTunes. I don't want to see. I was sort of like, put the blinders on, like, I don't want to look. I'm afraid of what I'm going to see. And yet, at some point, you get on there and you realize, okay, yeah, there's been a drop-off, but it's not catastrophic. And in the end, it gets back to what I did with my old show. And what I've tried to do with every creative endeavor that I do is just realizing that you're building something brick by brick. And you have to take that philosophical approach. There is no magic pill. There's no magic bullet of, oh, you're a new and noteworthy, therefore it's successful and it's going to continue. Knowing that that's just one part of the process and that the payoff and whatever that means for you, whatever that looks like for you, comes long term. And so it's a long game, and you have to be in it for the long game. And so just knowing that, okay, well, the numbers are gonna fall off, but that's not why I do this. I do it because I want to have these rich, deep conversations with people about life and being purposeful in their life in every aspect. And that to me is enough. And the fact that I'm able to share this with so many people and they can come in and, maybe it helps them too. Maybe it's from a service standpoint, maybe it's helping their lives. That's just such a huge bonus. And so, knowing that over time, it's going to continue to build, even though there was a big drop off after iTunes, after the new and noteworthy, and that can happen in any creative project. And so I think that's it's a really crucial concept to remember.
Well, the importance of looking at the long game, and then I also think of the deep game as well. You're looking for the long haul, but the depth of relationships that you're trying to develop with the people who are regular listeners. And you've apparently built up a good base, as well as, again, new listeners coming in and seeing the depth of what you're going for. It's not a
Yeah.
light program.
Yeah, well, which is good. Yeah, and I agree with the deep part, Charles. I mean, that's definitely part of the equation is, when people come in and they listen to your show and hopefully they listen to multiple shows if they're interested, then they begin to sort of get a sense of who you are and your voice and the way that you approach a topic. And for some people, that's gonna, it's gonna be something that they feel like they get value out of and they're gonna want to come back to that. And for some people, it's not. And then you just have to be okay with that, you know. And again, that can apply to any creative media, whether you're a photographer, a painter, a writer, a blogger, whatever that is. People are going to come in, they're going to hear your voice, they're going to see your writing, they're going to look at your paintings. And for some people, there'll be an instant little hit. They see it, they like it, it's great, but then over time they sort of lose interest. And for some people, they're going to see that or hear that, and it's going to be like, yeah, that's something I want to come back to again and again. And hopefully that my aim is in whatever medium I'm working in is trying to find people that are resonating with whatever I put out there in the world, and continuing to do that over time. So yeah, the deep part is a huge part of it.
Well, I think about developing content, and this is true whether, again, you've referenced visual art or music or blog post or whatever it may be, to develop content based on, again, on relationships rather than shock value or short-term hits. But to just think about, again, like in any relationship, you're trying to go deep and long versus just, can I get a couple of quick hits and move on? Kind of one-night stands, if you will, versus long-term relationship
Yeah.
approach to adding value to people's lives. And that's what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you, and that's why we're here talking because we have a relationship. We met at Camp GLP at an amazing experience that we shared with 250 other sort of philosophically like-minded souls, and out of that singular experience came so many tremendous connections and relationships, and that's already led to so many things for me. I'm just so thankful, and that's why I wish people out there listening to this and listening to any podcast, they would go out there and they would create relationships out in the real world, because you can listen to podcasts and you can read bloggers and you can do things online, but in the end, it's really about having real relationships. And the fact that, Charles, you and I have had conversations in person, in real life, standing in the middle of a field at Camp GLP. That adds a layer of depth and a layer to you and I having this conversation here virtually, thousands of miles away.
That it does. Well, speaking of risk, let's go back to your move from St. Louis out to San Diego. Talk a little bit about the impact that had on you and your work, because, I mean, you weren't a college student just moving to a new place starting out. You were already well established. That was a pretty big risk as well to move there. I mean, what you have to offer people, I think, is fairly big. So talk a little bit about that, the transitions you went through and what you learned.
No problem. What is the? I'm butchering my quotes today, Charles. The quote about necessity being the mother of invention, and really that's sort of what it was about for me. I grew up and I was born and raised outside of St. Louis, Missouri. I was born in a college town called Rolla in Missouri, but I spent most of my both childhood and adult life in St. Louis, or the St. Louis metropolitan area. And so that was home. And so I have a lifetime of friends and family there. Still have family that live there, including my sister. And so I was into my 30s, mid 30s. And at some point, like you said, I had established myself career-wise at a few different careers, but had relationships and networks and people there in St. Louis. But I hadn't really found my thing sort of long term. I was still searching around, and at some point, I basically had 2 job losses in 3 years. So the first of which was a company I'd worked for a number of years, 6 years, 6+ years, and it was sort of a shock. And it was one of these situations where people had said, well, we're family, we take care of each other, we look after the employees. And then when came to shove economically, that wasn't necessarily the case. So